Am I on? Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Thank you to WAPA. It's always a real pleasure to participate in the Future Wireless Technologies Forum. It's a pleasure to be in front of you this morning, and hopefully today there will be tremendous value in what you get out. And I agree with Tim, the networking is important to understand what's going on in the industry by all the different vendors, where we think the industry is going and how you can maximize and take advantage of where the industry is changing to accelerate your own business and your own goals. The last time I was in this room was a debutante's ball, but I'm not coming out. It was a long time ago. Thanks. So Warren Buffett, I like that bumper sticker, Buffett works for me, was sued for anti-competitive and for monopolistic practice by another newspaper. He buys newspapers, and the Carrier Express said that he was trying to close their newspaper down. They sued him, and on the witness stand, the lawyer for the Carrier Express said to him, "Have you said that owning a monopoly or market-dominant newspaper is like owning an unregulated toll bridge?" And he said, "Yes." And then the judge stepped in and said, "Why?" And he says, "Well, you build the bridge once. You build it in old money, and you build in new money. It's a nice business to have, if you pay your tolls." So, of course, it's nice to have and own the toll bridge and just bill year after year after year. But consider that the market we're in is an ever-changing market. What is the phone on the left? Anyone? Anyone? It's a Nokia. Someone shout. 6110. Greatest phone in the world. Who says that? You obviously don't have an iPhone. So, in 14 consecutive years, from 1998 to 2012, Nokia with 9 handsets sold over 1.4 billion phones. That is a pretty impressive amount. Number one handset maker in the world. Where is Nokia today? I think they're going back to making boots. BlackBerry. If you can imagine a world where BlackBerry Biz or Bez doesn't exist, I really do miss those days. You know, unlimited data for, what was it, 100 Rand a month or something like that. It's unbelievable. But technology changes dramatically. This is the industry we're in. So consider the operators. Now, we spend a lot of time with operators, and certainly in terms of backhaul or last mile access. We see very close to the coalface what the operators are doing. So one of the things that we've seen, and we know, is that the operators, and they've told us this, are planning for voice revenue to go to 0. They understand where their market is going. China Telecom, the world's largest operator, their ARPU is down to something like, I think I got it up here, it was something like $16 per user. And they blame the fact that people have gone off their voice networks and they have jumped onto OTT, over-the-top players. You know, the VoIP, the Vipers, the Vibers, the Skypes, the WhatsApps. And so voice revenue is gone. When was the last time someone here sent an SMS? Have you got an iPhone? Because you can write now. It's quite cool. I think Android might have had it for a while. But the idea is the market is changing, the technology we're using is changing, and where the traditional revenue came from is disappearing. So over-the-top players, their revenue is increasing 5-fold. And of course, operators are keeping their network going. They're still keeping their 2G, their 3G network. They have to invest in 4G. So they're asking the question, what is the short-term and long-term plan to arrest this decline in revenue? Now, you know the market has changed. So they have to provide more data, but they've got to provide more data because the demand is increasing, but they're getting less revenue for that data. So they need to come up with a plan. So think about how the market has changed in terms of technology. So 1G up to 30 kilohertz and 300 bits per second. I think back in the day that sounded like a lot. 2G, I mean just 200 kilohertz. That's all you needed as a network operator to deliver 2G. and you had this great attenuation, 20 Ks between base stations, a little bit close to it, very urban and dense environments. But then you had to go, and iPhone came along because 2G worked on Biz and Bez perfectly well, right? And then all of a sudden iPhone came along with a full browser, and you needed a network that could support all the data speeds. So 3G came along, and initially it was 1.8 megabits per second, and then it jumped with dual carrier to 42 megabits per second. And now we're talking 4G. And so the reinvestment goes along because 4G is designed for data only, so they have to keep their 3G in place, their 2G in place for voice calls. And now they have to build all this data, but the revenue's going, so the pipe, the bridge that they've built, people are going around the side. They're taking the alternative route. And then 5G is the buzzword. So 2020, we're expecting 5G to come in. And 5G is saying that you need 10 gigabits per second, 1 millisecond latency. But to deliver this, you need a minimum, at the moment, of 400 megahertz of spectrum. But consider the cost of spectrum. I think we did the calculation. 80 megahertz of spectrum and 3.6 gig is 86 million rand a year for a national license. The new request from ICASA, I think, is 3 billion rand for lots of 40 megahertz spectrum in high demand spectrum. So the FCC, seeing where this is going, and you imagine that the big telco giants, the Ericssons, the ZTEs, the Ciscos of this world, it's a $200 billion industry. The Qualcomms, they've got a lot invested because if the operators aren't buying networks, there goes their revenue. So there's a big lobby out there for 5G. It's the big bet. And so FCC in the States released nearly 11 gigahertz of spectrum for 5G. Some of it, 3.85, is licensed in 28 gig, 37 gig, and 39 gig, and I think some of the local operators are worried where they sit their 28 gig network at the moment. And then 7 gigahertz of unlicensed spectrum for 5G. So this is probably very familiar to you, is the spectrum that is available in South Africa that is license exempt. So we've got really for last mile, we've got 255 and 125 megahertz in 5 gig. We've got Wi-Fi on 2.4, obviously, point-to-point in 17 gig. And then we've got now 60 gig, which is unlicensed. We've got this new mobile-only spectrum that's been released by ICASA. 9 gigahertz of spectrum. I wonder where that's going. So the 5G ecosystem, ICASA has allocated to IMT only, which is mobile, 700, 800, 900 was existing, 1800 is existing. The auction for 2600 and 700 and 800 is pending, but at 3 billion rand lots, who's buying a lot here? I sure saw Neotel in the room. Oh, you're buying a lot. Sold. We can sort it out in the park. Okay. And then, of course, not only is they're looking for more spectrum, but the mobile operators are also, at the same time, saying we can go into unlicensed. So they've come up with LTA, which bonds different spectrum together if they've got in 900 and 1800 and then 2600, and then they can also bond in unlicensed in 5 gig. So this is a big play. And then they've got specific LTE unlicensed product that they're going to come to market with. Because spectrum is expensive, it's high demand. They get in small allocations, 5 megahertz, 10 megahertz. Sometimes you've got a national spectrum allocation of 56 megahertz. How much can you do with this? And then the big one, as I said to you a moment ago, ICASA in draft regulation, and thanks Peter for helping me with this, is no fixed outdoor installations are allowed, mobile only. What's that going to do when 5G and 10 gigabits per second and 1 millisecond latency arrives at your fiber to the home customer's door? So the ecosystem, and this is from Qualcomm, this is their roadmap, below 1 gigahertz, and sorry if you can't see it, long range for massive Internet of Things, that's below the 700, 800 that's been auctioned now. 1 gigahertz to 6 gigahertz, wider bandwidth for enhanced mobile broadband and mission critical applications. So there's your 1800, 2600, 3400 megahertz, that's going to go IMT. And then of course then there's above 6 gigahertz, millimeter wave, extreme bandwidths, and that's that 9 gigahertz. So interesting world. In the 15th century, the Turks exported tulips to Holland. Do you know that tulips come from Turkey? Who knew that? It does. It comes from Amsterdam now, but it was originally coming from Turkey. And over a few hundred years, or a couple decades, there's a virus started attacking the tulips. And the tulips started to, they originally were yellow or red, and they started to have these streaks, these veins that would run. And these became valuable. People started to see them in gardens and steal them, and people started to sell tulips. And there was such a buzz and such an incredible demand all of a sudden for tulips that the price of tulips went through the roof. So much so that it was the first futures market in the world. People were buying land, and they were guessing on what would grow there, and they were selling tulips that hadn't even yet grown. They were selling tulips by the gram. At one stage, at the height, 40 bulbs sold for the equivalent of R1 million, or 60,000 florins. The average middle-class person from the Netherlands earned about 1,500 florins a year. This was huge. There was so much speculation, it was crazy. And then, on the height, on the 25th of February, the day before, there were spectacular bids for tulips. And then on the 25th of February in 1637, at the auction, no one bought a tulip. No one arrived to buy a tulip. And the market crashed. The government had to step in and commit to paying 10% of the defaulting debt. Right? It was crazy. Why do I mention this? Fiber. Where's Tim? What is happening with fiber? So this is the UK stats. This is from the last Fiber to the Home Council. So in the UK right now, there's less than 400,000 homes that are passed with fiber. It's less than 2% uptake on fiber in the UK. Europe is seeing less and less fiber expansion, and this is now starting to ask questions. Why is this? There was this massive explosion on fiber, and now what we've seen is the incumbent operators are the fastest growing player in the fiber to the home market, and there are less and less projects per year. So, this is from Google Fiber. They see fiber as a moneymaker. So Google Fiber head Milo Medin says the company is not just conducting an extensive research project in Kansas City, he expects gigabit fiber networks to make money. And then this interesting one here. The plan was to let cities know that Google wanted to build a 1 gigabit per second broadband network and then look for cities interested in partnering on the network. So they said, who's interested? And they got 1,100 communities who said, I'm interested. And they said, there's a business here. Everyone's interested. So let's build fiber. So then guess what happened? It didn't work. So they went and bought a wireless business. And they bought WebPass in June. Right? Because, and I like what Eric Schmidt says here, as Alphabet's executive chairman, he said that at the annual shareholders meeting, these point-to-point solutions are cheaper than digging up your garden. And so they've had to rethink their strategy. The question is, and this is from the quote, will fiber be able to overcome the massive budget and expenditures of AT&T in the deployment of both its and Verizon's 5G networks when 10 gigabits per second arrives at your door? And you connect everything wirelessly, your car, your phone, your watch, your wife. So, in conclusion, and there's things that we should talk about today, and hopefully this creates some interest. The last mile is the end game. It's the entire game, especially for WISPs. Fiber is arriving quickly in dense urban, but at what return on investment? Right? Is it the toll bridge, or is it tulip mania? The game is being changed. Gigahertz of spectrum is being allocated to mobile. High demand spectrum is, in this country, 3 billion rand. Starting bid. Prepare today that IoT is on its way. because the operators are doing it. The gorillas are doing it. The large telco manufacturers, the chip makers, they're all preparing. So WISPs, to be relevant today, in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years from now, a couple of things. One is own the customer. Go and get him. Go and get him now. And then make yourself sticky. Make yourself as sticky as possible. Let your customers love you. Give the best service you possibly can. And then add services, things that they need. This way, remain relevant, and of course, maximize your margin. So thank you very much. Look forward to engaging with you today, and enjoy the rest of Future Wireless Technology Forum.